2 weeks passed in a flurry of flour, grease and grease-smeared parchment paper. By the time soft launch day arrived, Inigo stood behind the polished wooden counter of the McCronald wearing a freshly stitched red apron, trimmed with golden thread at the edges. He glanced down to smooth a wrinkle over the front, where a simple patch had been sewn with the shop's name in bold letters. The place smelled of toasted bread and sizzling meat, warm and savory and welcoming. "Menus up," Lyra called from the customer side, nodding toward the board they had mounted the night before. It was painted in deep crimson and bright yellow, just like the chain Inigo remembered back home. Each item was written in blocky hand-painted letters. Classic burger, double flame, potato frites, cheese melt, crispy bird, and sweet brew for their house tea blend. Inigo tightened his grip on the spatula. "You sure about this?" Lyra gave him a look. "We faced down a monster in the rift. This is just cooking. But this is real," he muttered. "This is everything I've dreamed of since getting here." She walked up to the counter, resting her arms casually on it. "And now it's time to show them why." At exactly 10 o'clock the door creaked open. Their first customer stepped inside. Elise, the guild receptionist who wore a cloak over her usual uniform. She blinked at the fresh paint, the warm glow of the hanging lanterns, and the inviting scent hanging in the air. "This is cozy," she said. "Smells amazing." Inigo stepped forward. "Welcome to the McCronald. Today's a special tasting menu, discounted prices, feedback encouraged." "You had me at discount," Elise said, pulling out a few silver coins. "I'll try the classic burger and frites." Inigo nodded and stepped back into the kitchen. The rhythm kicked in immediately. Grill fired up, buns sliced and placed in the oven, patties slapped onto the iron pan and seared to a gentle sizzle. Lyra prepped the tray, filling a paper pouch with freshly fried potato slices, crispy and golden. Within minutes, Elise's tray was ready. A steaming burger wrapped in thin wax paper, a pouch of fries and a small cup of sweet tea. She took one bite. Then another. Then stopped. "By the gods," she muttered, mouth half full. "This is better than anything I've had in the entire district." "What did you put in this?" "Salt, pepper, a few special spices," Inigo said. "But mostly, just technique." Elise looked around and waved toward the street. "You mind if I tell the others at the guild? Be our guest." She didn't even finish the tray before stepping outside, waving her hand and calling out to someone around the corner. Moments later, 2 adventurers entered, both silver-ranked regulars that Inigo vaguely recognized from the sparring hall. One of them had already heard the rumor from Elise. "I heard there's something here that puts tavern roast to shame," the taller one said. "Line forms here," Lyra replied smoothly. Within 20 minutes the place was buzzing. The seating bench by the window filled up fast, and even though there were only 5 chairs inside, people didn't seem to mind standing. The scent of sizzling patties and frying potatoes wafted down the street, catching the attention of passers-by like a hook. Inigo manned the cooking station non-stop, grilling, flipping, assembling with practiced rhythm. Lyra operated the front, taking orders, pouring drinks, passing trays with a smile that was both genuine and sharp. By midday a line had formed outside. "You seeing this?" Lyra asked during a rare lull, wiping sweat from her brow. Inigo looked up from behind a stack of buns. "I think we might need to double the batch tomorrow." The local blacksmith came in with his apprentice, still wearing half his work gear. "Smells better than the forge," he grunted. "Give me one of those cheese melts." Later came a trio of academy students, drawn by the whispers circulating through the market. One of them took a bite of the double flame burger and let out a sound halfway between a moan and a gasp. "This is criminally good," he said. "I'd trade a week's allowance for another." Outside, a pair of stall vendors who ran fruit carts began offering small samples of sliced oranges to customers waiting in line, hoping to ride the wave of traffic. The buzz spread like wildfire. Even the local baker swung by in the afternoon to witness the crowd his buns had helped attract. "I'll need more dough," he told Inigo. "You're gonna bleed me dry." "You keep supplying, I'll keep ordering," Inigo said, slapping flour from his gloves. As the sun dipped low and the line finally began to shorten, Lyra and Inigo collapsed behind the counter with 2 trays of their own. They each picked up a burger, clinked them together like wine glasses and took a bite in unison. "Still warm. Still crisp. So good. Do you realize what we did today?" Lyra asked, licking a bit of sauce from her thumb. I think we just changed the city's food culture, Inigo replied. She smirked. And this is just the soft opening. Outside, a group of kids peeked in, noses pressed against the window. One of them waved excitedly at Lyra, who gave a mock salute in return. Word's spreading, she said. By next week we'll need more hands. I've already got plans for that, Inigo said, flipping to a second notebook. We train part-timers, keep the recipes consistent, batch the prep in the morning, run 2 shifts. We can manage. You sound like a proper restaurant owner. I feel like one. The door creaked open again and a well-dressed woman entered. Her hair was pinned back in noble curls and a jeweled pin glinted on her lapel. She looked around the shop with a calm, assessing eye. Excuse me, she said softly. Is the owner present? That would be me, Inigo replied. I'm Salandra Vale, owner of the Market Squares Merchant Syndicate, she said. I've received half a dozen reports about a new food vendor causing quite the stir. I wanted to see for myself. She took a seat, ordered a classic burger and tea, and ate with graceful precision. When she finished, she folded the wrapper neatly and dabbed her lips with a silk handkerchief. I'll be in touch, she said cryptically. You may want to prepare for a visit from city officials. As she left, Inigo turned to Lyra. Is that good or bad? Depends, she said. But if the noble merchants are noticing us already, that's a win. They cleaned up that evening under lantern light. Oil was drained. Counters wiped down. Trash taken out. Inigo stood behind the counter once more, staring out at the now quiet street. Tomorrow the lines would return. But tonight he'd take pride in knowing he had done something few ever could in this world, or any world. He brought fast food to Fantasy. And they loved it. The sun had barely passed its zenith when the bell above them Cronold's door rang for the 23rd time that morning. The line, which had already begun coiling halfway down the cobbled street, now glimmered with silk robes and velvet cloaks, the unmistakable mark of upper-class wealth. Lyra peeked out the window and raised an eyebrow. Did a noble carriage overturn somewhere? What's with all the glitz? Inigo didn't even look up from the friar. I've been expecting this. You have. Oh yeah, he said as he sprinkled a dash of imported pepper over the patties. You introduce something popular and eventually the nobles come sniffing around. Give it 10 minutes, we'll have our first entitled brat acting like they own the building. Sure enough, as the door creaked open again, in stepped a group of 5 students from the Royal Magic Academy of Eldrith. 2 girls with perfectly curled hair whispered behind folding fans. A lanky boy with glowing runes etched along his gloves glanced around with disdain. And at the center stood a strikingly handsome youth with slick platinum hair and an expression permanently stuck between boredom and arrogance. The first girl stepped up to the counter. We were told there was something palatable here. You heard right, Lyra said smoothly. Welcome to them, Cronold. Menu's right there. Order at the counter. The girl stared at the menu as though deciphering ancient runes. What is a burger? Inigo leaned over. Grilled beef, seasoned, wrapped in a bun. Crispy potatoes on the side. Think of it as a noble's roast dinner, but handheld and faster. There was a pause. I suppose I'll take one, the girl said, raising her chin. If it's as revolutionary as people claim. Soon enough, the rest of the students placed their orders, reluctantly dropping silver coins into the payment tray as if they feared their noble lineage might be tarnished by mere commerce. Yet once they sat down and actually took their first bites, their posture shifted. Shoulders relaxed, brows lifted, eyes widened. By the spirits, one of them whispered, this is revolutionary. Inigo smirked from behind the grill. Told you. More students continued to arrive. The Magic Academy was clearly on break and word had spread fast. Even a few of the professors trailed in. Distinguished figures in long enchanted coats who pretended to be unimpressed until they'd tasted the fries. Amidst the growing bustle, Inigo noticed a disturbance near the back of the dining area. 2 students, a girl and a boy, stood near the corner. The girl wore a crisp academy robe and had long lustrous platinum hair tied neatly in a ribbon. She was clearly trying to move away, but the boy, with rich black hair and a smug smile, stepped forward, cornering her with a hand on the wall beside her shoulder. Come now, Serena, he purred, voice slick with false charm. Why continue pretending you don't want this? Your family and mine have discussed this already. You're to be my bride, it's already decided. I never agreed to anything, Serena said coldly. And I'm here for lunch, not for your ego. Inigo's eyes narrowed. He stepped out from behind the counter, wiping his hands on a towel. The noble boy didn't notice, he was too busy smirking down at Serena. There's no reason to resist. You're beautiful, I'm powerful, and together we could be. Hey. The boy turned, blinking. Inigo stood a few feet away, calm but firm. Table service only, Inigo said, voice cool as winter steel. No harassment allowed. You either sit and eat or you leave. The noble student raised an eyebrow. And who are you to tell me what to do? I'm the owner. The smirk returned. Owner of a grease hut? Do you even know who I am? Don't care, Inigo said, not missing a beat. The noble's smile twisted. My father sits on the Ministry of Trade and Industry. One word from me and this shop closes by tomorrow. Then I guess you'll have to make that word count, Inigo replied. But right now you're disrupting my business and bothering a customer. So this is your last warning. Gasps rippled through the room. Even Lyra had frozen, tray in hand. The boy stepped forward, eyes glowing faintly with magic. I challenge you to a duel. Inigo blinked. Of course you do. This was expected from his station. When cornered, they would try to save their ego by challenging someone confronting them. Do you accept? I accept the part where you get the hell out of my shop. The noble raised a hand, gathering mana at his palm. Coward. Typical low-born behavior. Stop that, Cernan, Serena pleaded, but he ignored. You really want to do this? Inigo's brows knitted as he went on a serious mode. Of course I do, this will be, huh? Cernan noticed something. Ho! You are a gold-ranked adventurer? That's right, I do, Inigo replied simply. You do know what that means. I do, and I am not even scared. After all, adventurers are just a bunch of ragtags, unsuccessful lowborns who play with blades because they'll never hold real power. The words echoed through the Mchronald, silencing chatter and clattering trays. Every noble student within earshot turned to look. Some gasped, others watched with amused curiosity. Lyra didn't move, but her eyes were locked on Inigo, already prepared to intervene if things got out of hand. But Inigo? He just sighed. Right, he muttered. And here I thought you'd be original. Cernan stepped forward, a faint magical aura flickering to life around him. His ornate academy uniform shimmered with subtle enchantments, defensive wards stitched into gold-threaded hems, a mana amplification crest embedded in the collar. He moved with the lazy confidence of someone who'd never lost a duel he didn't start. I, Cernan Velmont of House Velmont, he said grandly, projecting his voice for maximum attention, challenge this grease-smeared commoner to a formal magical duel. Gasps again. Someone near the front dropped their drink. Inigo scratched his cheek. Right in the middle of lunch rush? Cernan sneered. Are you backing out again? No, Inigo said, calmly walking out from behind the counter. He untied his apron and handed it to Lyra, who took it without a word. He cracked his knuckles. I'm just trying to decide whether to beat you fast or give the crowd a little show. You'll regret mocking me. Serena, still standing a few steps behind, looked torn between alarm and awe. You don't have to do this, sir. I'm not doing this for pride, Inigo replied. I'm doing it so people like him stop thinking they can throw their name around and treat others like trash. Cernan's smirk deepened. Big words for someone who flips meat. Bigger fists too, Inigo muttered. Let's take this outside. The crowd outside the Mchronald had grown to a size more fitting for a Colosseum spectacle than a restaurant dispute. Students from the Royal Magic Academy filled the street, shoulder to shoulder in embroidered cloaks and enchanted robes. Murmurs and gasps passed like wind across wheat fields as the duel was announced. Inigo stepped onto the cobbled path, the midday sun casting his shadow long behind him. He stretched his neck casually, eyes scanning the gathered nobles with a tired kind of amusement. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't angry. He was simply annoyed. Cernan Velmont stood at the far end of the clearing, arms crossed, his entourage keeping a respectful distance. The noble student's cloak fluttered with mana-imbued silk, and his gloves pulsed with a soft cerulean light. Enchanted, of course. I will state the rules, Cernan declared, voice laced with arrogance. As tradition dictates, A single-round duel. Magic is allowed. Weapons permitted. The duel ends only when one participant is incapacitated or yields. Inigo nodded. Fine by me. Cernan raised an eyebrow. You accept without hesitation? Inigo grinned. I've watched enough anime to know how this goes. Cernan blinked. Anime? But before he could press further, Inigo held out his right hand. In a flash of blue system light, a sleek matte black Desert Eagle appeared in his grip. The gun materialized with a weighty clunk. Magazine loaded, safety off, chamber primed. The metallic glint of the barrel caught the sunlight, drawing a gasp from the students. What is that? Someone whispered. A wand, another speculated. Cernan stared at the weapon, confused for half a second before laughing. This is your plan? That little stick? You wield no visible mana. No elemental crest. Not even a summoning circle. You're hopeless. Inigo didn't respond. He simply raised the barrel and pointed it downward, testing the aim. Then he looked back up. You ready? Before Cernan could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. Wait. Serena stepped forward from the crowd, concern clouding her noble features. Please stop this madness. This isn't necessary. Silence. Cernan barked, whirling on her. This duel is my right. And once it's done you'll learn your place too. Serena flinched. Inigo narrowed his eyes. Not just a pompous brat, he muttered. But a creep too. A nearby student raised a hand. We'll count you in. 3. Cernan began charging mana in his palm. 2. Inigo's finger rested gently on the trigger. 1. Bang. The report of the gun shattered the air. It echoed like thunder across the stone buildings, startling birds from the rooftops. Students ducked and gasped, some even screamed. The spell Cernan had been preparing fizzled out as the bullet slammed directly into his right shoulder. He spun from the impact, crashing to one knee, clutching his shoulder as a crimson patch bloomed across his pristine academy uniform. Arg! The noble's scream was guttural, a raw cry of disbelief and pain. It's not magic, one of the mages whispered in horror. Cernan was shaking, teeth clenched. What the hell was that? Just a magic item, Inigo said calmly, lowering his weapon. Nothing special. But it works. You bastard. Cernan roared, fumbling with his left hand to conjure a glyph in the air. I'll burn you to cinders. But before the spell could fully form, bang! Another round exploded from the gun, striking Cernan's left shoulder with surgical precision. The spell shattered. Cernan dropped to both knees, his entire upper body quivering, mouth wide as if trying to scream, but only breath came out. Inigo walked forward, one slow step at a time, as if approaching a piece of trash to be swept aside. You done yet? He asked, voice devoid of emotion. Cernan gritted his teeth. No. I'll never yield to a lowborn. Inigo holstered the Desert Eagle in a flash of light, then calmly delivered a swift kick to Cernan's face. The noble's head snapped back with a dull thud as his body collapsed flat against the cobblestone. Silence. Then gasps. Whispers. He won. That wasn't even close. Did you see how fast that was? Cernan lay unconscious, arms splayed, blood soaking into the fabric of his clothes. Serena stood frozen in place, one hand over her mouth. Even Lyra, still holding the apron Inigo had handed her, could only blink. Inigo turned to the crowd and spoke plainly. This shop is open to everyone. Nobles, commoners, adventurers, merchants, I don't care. But inside my walls, you treat each other with respect. Anyone who can't do that. He looked down at Cernan. Ends up like this. He dusted his hands and turned away from the unconscious noble, walking back toward the restaurant. As he passed Serena, he paused. You all right? He asked. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yes. Thank you. Good. You shouldn't have to deal with that garbage. Before she could respond, a small stream of light from a nearby rooftop glittered, capturing the moment in the lens of a magically enchanted monocle. A professor from the academy, unknown to most of the students below, lowered the device with a smirk. Interesting. He muttered. Very interesting. Back at the counter, Inigo took his apron back from Lyra and tied it once more behind his back. The kitchen smelled like sizzling grease again. just the way he liked it. You all right? Lyra asked. Yeah, he said. Just another entitled brat put in his place. And you didn't even mess up the lunch rush. Inigo grinned. Behind them, students began slowly re-entering the restaurant. Most still stared, still whispering, but none dared to speak too loudly. Even the ones who had initially scoffed now wore an expression of wary respect. One student, one of Cernan's own group, shuffled forward and cleared his throat. I'd like to order a double flame burger, please. Lyra smiled, tapping her quill. Coming right up. Meanwhile, Inigo returned to his workstation in the kitchen, preparing the ingredients for the burgers and fries. While working on it, his mind was occupied with something. This event just now would be heard across the capital city and there will be repercussions. But if that meant saving a girl from potential abuse, it's worth it. He would deal with those once they come. It was barely an hour since the duel ended, yet word had already spread across the capital like wildfire. Inside them, Kronold, the once rowdy chatter of the lunchtime crowd had turned into a low, reverent buzz. The restaurant no longer felt like a place to just eat. It felt like a battlefield's aftermath. Cernan Velmont's blood had been cleaned off the cobbles outside, but the mark he left, both metaphorically and literally, lingered in the air. Inigo wiped down the counter, the smell of seared beef clinging to the air as grease popped on the skillet. Lyra passed him a fresh tray of buns. They're still talking about it, she murmured, eyes flicking to a group of students seated by the windows. Every new batch that walks in has that same look, like they're expecting you to explode into another duel at any second. Inigo snorted. If they behave, there won't be a problem. Lyra leaned closer, lowering her voice. I hope that's the case. We just opened and I don't want us closing so soon. They won't, I promise, Inigo replied. Just then the door swung open again, not to the usual ring of customers, but to the heavy steps of armored boots. 3 figures walked in, all dressed in dark blue and gold-trimmed robes bearing the seal of the royal ministry. The man in the lead had a chiseled face, a heavy brow, and a scowl that seemed permanently etched onto his features. Inigo Velasquez, the man barked. He stopped mid-flip. That's me. I am Magistrate Halbrun, under the authority of Trade and Industrial Regulation, the man declared. This establishment is to be reviewed and may face immediate closure for violation of noble protection statutes and public endangerment. Gasps erupted in the dining hall. Students shrank back, eyes wide. Lyra stepped between them instinctively. Violation. Inigo repeated, his tone neutral. By order of Lord Albrecht Velmont, acting head of the ministry and father to the injured, you are to apologize in public, kneel, kiss the boots of the injured noble, and submit to a week-long ban on business while reparations are calculated. A vein pulsed at Inigo's temple. He wiped his hands on his apron, calmly placed his spatula down and stepped around the counter. You're threatening to close my shop, he said, because I defended it from a noble who was harassing a customer, then challenged me to a public duel which he lost? It is the prerogative of noble law. It's also the prerogative of common law, Inigo snapped, to file for harassment, grave threat and abuse of authority. Which I will unless this farce stops right now. Gasps again. The magistrate stepped forward. Watch your tongue, lowborn. No, you watch who you're siding with. That duel was witnessed by 24 students, and I assume several enchanted recording devices. He lost. I didn't provoke him. And if you want me to kiss his boots, he'll have to be conscious enough to lift them. The magistrate's glare tightened. Before either could speak further, a heavy knock echoed from the door. It didn't open. It just boomed once like a judge's gavel. Everyone turned. The door then opened on its own, and in stepped a tall, thin man with snow-white hair tied neatly at his nape. His cloak was a deep violet trimmed in metallic silver. Arcane runes shimmered along the lining of his robes. Around his collar hung a crystalline emblem shaped like a sun with 7 rays. The room went dead silent. Lyra gasped. That's Headmaster Aloan, a student whispered. One of the High Council mages. The principal of the Royal Magic Academy of Aldrith stepped into them Kronold like he owned the air itself. He ignored the magistrate entirely, his gaze fixed on Inigo. You're the one who bested Cernan Velmont in a sanctioned duel? He asked. Inigo tilted his head slightly. Yeah. Eloan took a long step forward, hands clasped behind his back. Your technique, your weapon, your mana signature. It doesn't match any known registry. No staff, no incantation. And yet, instantaneous projection of force with high kinetic yield. And no ambient elemental disruption. You didn't cast magic. I didn't. But you used something. And it's clear you didn't rely on brute force or luck. Inigo gave a lazy shrug. I use what works. The headmaster's eyes gleamed with interest. The academy would like to invite you, Eloan said, to join as a special student under independent research designation. You'd retain your business, your identity and status as an adventurer, but you'd have full access to our resources, facilities and curriculum. The room gasped again. Even the magistrate looked stunned. You want him? Halbrand said incredulously. After he injured your top student? Eloan didn't even glance at him. Cernan was a fool and acted like one. Magic is not a crutch for privilege. That duel was justified, recorded and legal. And the victor just might be the most interesting anomaly we've seen in decades. Inigo took a moment to think. He folded his arms. You are admitting me to your school? Yes. Lyra nudged him gently. It's a rare opportunity, Inigo. Besides, nothing will be lost. He sighed. I'll think about it. That's fair, Eloan replied. But don't take too long. Opportunity often knocks only once. Unlike me. He turned, robes billowing as he exited the store as quietly as he'd entered. The silence he left behind was suffocating. Halbrand, red-faced and defeated, cleared his throat and barked, We'll be reviewing this establishment at a later date. He spun and stormed out, his guards scrambling to follow. Lyra finally let out the breath she'd been holding. That was the most intense lunch shift I've ever had. Inigo picked up his spatula again. And I thought the lunch rush was bad. She leaned on the counter, grinning. So, Magic Academy student, huh? He shook his head, flipping another patty. Magic Academy, huh? I will love to try it. Of course, in every Isekai anime or light novels, a Magic Academy is one that should experience. The students still in the restaurant slowly resumed their meals, though now their eyes glimmered not just with curiosity but awe. Many of them whispered, others wrote in enchanted notebooks, but all had one thing in common. They had just witnessed something shift in the world of Eldrith. And the man at the center of it was still grilling burgers like nothing happened. The next morning arrived with clear skies and a cool breeze that cut through the stone alleyways of Eldrith. Inigo stood in front of a massive wrought iron gate wrapped in ivy and guarded by twin statues of roaring dragons. Above the arch was a silver crest, 7 stars encircling a single flaming tower. The Royal Magic Academy of Eldrith. He adjusted his coat, double-checked the confirmation scroll Eloan had left him and approached the gate. As if on cue, the heavy doors creaked open on their own. Waiting just inside the courtyard was Serena. She looked different today, still in her pristine academy robes, but her platinum hair was no longer tied in a formal ribbon. Instead, it fell softly over her shoulders, catching the sunlight like strands of silk. Her large, almond-shaped eyes brightened the moment she saw him. There was something inherently gentle about her, an aura of calm in a city of chaos. Inigo, she said, her voice soft and a little high-pitched, the kind that wouldn't feel out of place coming from a shy anime heroine. You came. I said I would, didn't I? He said with a small grin. You didn't think I'd get cold feet? Serena shook her head quickly. Oh, I hoped you would. He chuckled. That makes 2 of us. She fiddled with the hem of her sleeve. Headmaster Eloan asked me to give you a short tour before your appointment. Is that all right with you? Perfect. Lead the way, Miss Tour Guide. Serena's cheeks flushed pink. I'll do my best. They walked together down the central walkway, flanked on either side by majestic spires and stained glass towers. The academy was unlike anything Inigo had seen. Part university, part cathedral, part magic fortress. Students in flowing robes zipped by on floating platforms, while others conjured hovering notebooks and familiars with a flick of their hands. Is this normal? Inigo asked, watching a griffin casually land near the stable tower. More or less, Serena giggled. That's Professor Kravitz's familiar. He teaches aeromancy. Sounds windy. Serena laughed again, a soft bell-like sound. You'll get used to it. Over there's the main library. It holds over 200,000 volumes, some dating back to the age of founding. And that building on the left is the dueling Coliseum. Inigo raised an eyebrow. How many duels happen around here? Too many, she muttered under her breath. Some students think winning a duel makes them better than everyone else. He smirked. Sounds familiar. She peeked up at him, smiling a little. But you're different. Oh. You won, but you didn't gloat. You protected me. I think that matters more than anything. That caught him off guard. He looked away briefly, scratching the back of his head. Just did what anyone should have done. Serena shook her head. Not everyone would. They reached a tall cylindrical building at the far end of the campus. White marble with golden inlays and a rune circle etched into the entire front lawn. This is the Tower of Administration, she explained. The headmaster's office is on the top floor. He's expecting you. Inigo nodded. Thanks for showing me around. Serena's smile softened. I'm glad I got to. They stood in silence for a second, just long enough for the moment to almost feel romantic. Serena looked like she wanted to say something more, but instead she bowed politely. I'll leave you here. Good luck, Inigo. Thanks. With that she turned and walked away, her steps light and graceful. Inigo watched her for a second longer before heading up the spiral stairs that led into the tower. The headmaster's office was absurdly large, at least 3 stories tall, lined with bookshelves, alchemical equipment, and a telescope that pointed not to the sky, but to another realm entirely. Floating orbs danced along the vaulted ceiling, and the floor was a glowing mosaic of the Academy's founding history. Eloan stood by the window, hands behind his back as he stared out over the campus like a chess master examining his board. Inigo Velasquez, he said without turning. Punctual. I admire that. Inigo stepped forward. Good morning, headmaster. Eloan turned, his silver-white hair catching the glint of arcane light. I take it Serena showed you around? She did, Inigo replied. She's sweet. She's one of our best. Comes from a long line of court mages, though you'd never know it from how modest she is. Inigo smiled. Yeah. That checks out. Eloan gestured to a chair in front of his desk. Sit. Let's talk business. Inigo took a seat. As I said yesterday, Eloan continued, your skills, while unorthodox, are undeniably real. That weapon you used, it's not conventional magic, but it behaved like it. The Academy defines magic not just by tradition but by function. You manipulated the battlefield. You produced force through unknown means. You defended the weak. That in itself qualifies you for assessment. Assessment. Inigo repeated. The headmaster nodded. Every prospective student, no matter their background, must undergo the proving. It's a standardized evaluation meant to measure your aptitude, resourcefulness, and magical potential. Let me guess. Pass and I get in? Precisely. But this isn't just about entering a school. Should you succeed, you will be recognized not just as a student, but as a contributor to the magical sciences. You'll have access to classified spellcraft, research privileges, and faculty-level lab time. Sounds intense. It is, Eloan said. But so are you. Inigo leaned back. So what's the test? You'll find out soon enough, the headmaster replied, his expression unreadable. It changes based on the applicant. You'll face it tomorrow. Inigo gave a casual nod. All right. Let's go for it. Eloan smiled faintly. Good. I look forward to seeing what kind of anomaly you truly are. Inigo stood up, steady and unshaken. Then I'll see you tomorrow. As he left the office, the sun outside bathed the Academy in gold. Tomorrow, he thought, would be the real beginning of his Ice Sky adventure. Complete the test and he would be like other main characters in Ice Sky animes that he watched. This is going to be exhilarating. The following morning, the sky above Eldrith was painted in hues of pale gold, and the Academy bells rang across the sprawling campus. Students bustled through the open courtyards and stone archways, most of them whispering about a new applicant who had defeated Cernan Valmont with a weapon no one could quite explain. That applicant now stood in front of the examination hall, wearing a simple black jacket and his signature smirk. A tall man with a thick beard and monocle, wearing professor's robes lined with deep red, opened the door and looked Inigo up and down. Inigo Velasquez, I presume, the professor said, rolling a scroll in his hand. That's me, Inigo replied casually. I am Professor Maelric. I'll be your overseer for today's proving. Follow me. The interior of the examination hall was part dueling arena, part laboratory and part classroom. Runes glowed softly from the stone walls, and floating lanterns bobbed in midair, illuminating the rows of enchanted testing equipment. Before we begin, Maelric said, gesturing toward a small raised platform, please step into the affinity circle. We must determine your natural alignment first. Inigo stepped onto the glowing circle. As he did, strands of pale light slithered up from the runes, scanning him like unseen fingers brushing over his aura. For a moment nothing happened. Then a chime rang and the circle displayed a strange pattern. A jagged starburst at the center, not aligned with fire, wind, earth, water, or even shadow. Maelric frowned. No elemental affinity, no arcane resonance. Curious, the professor muttered, adjusting his monocle. So I failed already? Inigo asked. On the contrary, Maelric replied, you triggered the enchantment affinity marker. Rare. Very rare. Enchantment magic is not flashy, but it's one of the most difficult to master. You may lack traditional casting abilities, but your body emits a low-level enhancement field. That means your magic augments things. Inigo tilted his head. So, support magic? More or less, the professor nodded. Now let's see how you perform in a practical scenario. Maelric led him to a large testing range. At the far end stood a row of reinforced training dummies made of ironwood and layered cloth. Show us your enchantment potential, Maelric said, handing Inigo a rune chalk and a blank sheet of test parchment. You may channel your magic into any object you possess. Inigo looked at the dummy, then at the chalk, and then back at the professor. Anything I want, he clarified. Yes. Cast enchantment. We'll measure the impact. A smirk tugged at the corner of Inigo's lips. All right. You asked for it. He reached into his inventory ring and pulled out his old reliable, his Desert Eagle. A clean, silver-chromed hand cannon that gleamed in the sunlight like a divine relic. The moment he gripped it, a faint aura of energy shimmered along the barrel. Professor Maelric blinked. What is that? My magic, Inigo said simply. He whispered a soft enchantment, using nothing but instinct. The magic responded to his will, infusing the bullet with a faint glow. He raised the Desert Eagle, aimed at the dummy, and squeezed the trigger. Boom. The gunshot echoed like thunder, and the enchanted bullet slammed directly into the dummy's chest, puncturing clean through the ironwood and splintering the support behind it. The students observing from the gallery gasped. Maelric's jaw dropped. That wasn't elemental. That wasn't kinetic casting. What kind of magical focus is that? He exclaimed. Inigo blew on the barrel. It's called a handgun. But I got more. Before Maelric could respond, Inigo reached into his inventory again and pulled out something longer. An M4 carbine rifle, matte black, cold and menacing in his hands. Observe, Inigo said casually. He didn't even bother enchanting this time. He aimed and fired a quick burst. Multiple rounds tore into another dummy, riddling it into what looked like a shredded scarecrow. Fragments of cloth and wood flew in every direction. The target looked like it had been chewed up by a monster. Students were standing now, eyes wide in disbelief. Incredible, Maelric whispered. It's like raw magic forged into metal. And yet it's not magic at all. Oh, I'm not done, Inigo said, smiling. He tapped into the system store. Purchase M203 grenade launcher. 800 tokens. Purchase 40mm high explosive round. 20 tokens. The launcher appeared in his hand with a metallic clunk, and he affixed it under the M4 barrel with practiced ease. He loaded the round, flicked the safety, and aimed toward a heavily reinforced dummy surrounded by protection wards. He fired. A deep, chest-rattling boom echoed through the chamber, followed by a fiery explosion that engulfed the dummy in a burst of smoke and flame. When it cleared, the reinforced target was lying in pieces. Gasps erupted across the hall. That's not fireball, Maelric muttered, genuinely shaken. That's something else. It's like a flame bolt, but denser, more destructive. You crafted a new form of magical augmentation. Weaponized support enhancement. Inigo holstered his weapon and turned to the stunned professor. So, did I pass? Maelric took a moment before straightening his robes. The practical portion is complete. We've seen enough. A bell rang and the floating lanterns dimmed slightly. An attendant guided Inigo into the final room, a stone chamber filled with long desks and glowing paper. Now begins the written portion, the assistant said. Subjects: grammar, mathematics, magical theory, and world history. You have 90 minutes. Inigo took his seat, cracked his knuckles, and started writing. Grammar? Easy. Verb tenses, sentence construction, synonyms. Child's play for someone from Earth. Mathematics? It was basic arithmetic, geometry, and algebra. He breezed through the equations, scribbling down answers with fluid speed. History, though, that was another matter. The questions made no sense to him. He made educated guesses, but it was like taking a pop quiz on a fantasy game's lore he skipped. When the time was up, he put down his pen and leaned back. Finished? The assistant asked. Yep. Hope I got partial credit on that last section. Later that afternoon, Inigo returned to the main lobby of the academy, where Professor Maelric stood with a crystal tablet in hand. You scored full marks in grammar and mathematics. Remarkable. Most students struggle with the math. As for history, you scored poorly, Maelric admitted. I'm bad at history. He tapped the crystal. Overall, your composite score exceeds our minimum threshold. Congratulations, Inigo Velasquez. You've passed the proving. Cheers erupted from a few onlookers. Some students, some instructors. Even Serena, who had been watching from the far hallway, clapped with both hands pressed shyly to her chest. Inigo gave a small bow. Glad to be here. Maelric smiled, still clearly fascinated by the unfamiliar weapons Inigo had demonstrated. You're an oddity, Mr. Velasquez. A modern enchanter. We may need to create an entirely new classification for your kind of magic. With that, the crowd slowly dispersed and Serena made her way toward him. You passed, she said with a bright smile. Told you I would. What were those things you used? She asked curiously. I'll explain later. Over lunch. He blushed a little, nodding. I'll hold you to that. As they walked side by side through the academy halls, Inigo glanced up at the towering spires around him. He was now officially a student of the Royal Magic Academy. The bell rang with a long, resonant chime that echoed across the Royal Magic Academy's sprawling campus. Its tone was deep and commanding, not unlike the sound of a war horn softened by centuries of tradition. To the seasoned students, it signaled just another day of lessons. But to the newly admitted, it marked the beginning of something far more significant. Inigo Velasquez adjusted the strap on his satchel as he crossed the courtyard toward the main lecture hall. The building loomed like a castle wing, arched windows, flying buttresses, and polished ivory stone that gleamed under the morning sun. Statues of the 7 founding magi lined the entrance, each immortalized in marble poses of power and contemplation. A student in blue robes nearly collided with him, muttering an apology before dashing off. Others walked in groups, floating textbooks orbiting lazily above their heads. The place buzzed with life and layered conversation, most of it over his head. Terms like mana transmutation vectors, elemental drift, and sympathetic circle calibration. He might as well have stepped into an alchemy textbook. He double-checked the parchment schedule given to him by the admissions clerk. His first class, Foundations of Magical Theory, Room 101, instructed by Professor Lenora Thorne. All right, he muttered. Let's get this over with. He walked into the hall and found room 101 near the end of the corridor, its door marked with a symbol that shimmered when he touched it, an automatic ward that scanned his credentials and unlatched the door. Inside, the room was shaped like a small amphitheater, with stone benches arranged in ascending rings around a central teaching platform. A chalkboard stretched across one wall, and above it, arcane runes shifted and danced like constellations. Only a few students had arrived early, chatting softly or reviewing notes. Inigo picked a seat in the third row, far enough from the front to avoid scrutiny, but close enough to actually see the board. Just as he sat down, the door clicked again. He looked up and there she was, Serena. She paused in the doorway, blinking as her eyes adjusted to the dimly lit room. When she spotted him, her expression flickered from surprise to warmth in a heartbeat. Inigo, she said, stepping down the aisle. You're in this class too? I could say the same to you, he said, grinning. I thought you were a senior or something. She laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm just a first year. I enrolled late this term. Well then, guess I got lucky. Her cheeks flushed a faint pink as she took the seat beside him. I was so nervous I wouldn't know anyone. And now you do, Inigo said, slouching slightly in his chair. So what's this class about again? I forgot the syllabus already. Foundations, she said. Mostly magical theory, history of mana, and basic practical applications. It's a required course. Inigo made a face. Sounds dry. Professor Thorn's supposed to be nice. Strict but fair. As if summoned by name, the door opened again, and a woman swept into the room with the precision of a blade. She wore a robe of dark violet trimmed with silver, and her black hair was tied into a severe bun. Her eyes were sharp and assessing, like she could spot a lie before you even thought of telling one. Seats, she said without raising her voice, yet somehow commanding the entire room to fall silent. She stepped onto the central platform and waved her hand. The chalk levitated from its cradle and began writing on the board behind her in graceful strokes. Professor Lenora Thorn, Foundations of Magical Theory. My name, she said, is Lenora Thorn. I will be your instructor for this course. I do not care who your parents are, what noble house you claim, or how many duels you've won in the courtyard. In this room, your knowledge and effort are the only currency that matters. A few students sat straighter. Each of you comes from different magical backgrounds: elementalists, summoners, alchemists, and yes, even enchanters. She glanced briefly at Inigo as if already aware of what he was. You are here to learn not just what magic is but why it is. She raised her hand and a glowing sigil appeared midair, concentric circles with branching lines, like a glowing map of a solar system. This is the foundational mana lattice, the invisible structure that governs all magical interaction in our world. Every spell you cast, every enchantment you imbue, every rune you inscribe, traces its origin to this lattice. She continued explaining the concepts: mana flow, spell integrity, the four pillars of intent, and Inigo did his best to follow. Serena, beside him, took notes diligently, her handwriting neat and curved like calligraphy. Inigo scribbled what he could, mostly sketches and summaries. He knew this would take time to learn. After an hour, Professor Thorn concluded her introduction and passed out small brass rings. These are beginner conduit rings. Each of you will use them to perform your first mana circulation task. Enchanters, she added, glancing again at Inigo, may infuse objects instead. She approached his desk and placed a small silver coin in front of him. Try this. Channel your enhancement magic into the coin. The goal is resonance. Make it glow. Inigo frowned. What if I overshoot it? She smiled thinly. Then it glows brighter. He picked up the coin, focusing. It felt cool in his hand. He visualized the way he'd enchanted his Desert Eagle bullet, how the energy responded to will, not words. He pushed. A soft hum filled the air and the coin glowed with a golden aura. Runes appeared along its edge, unintentional but precise. Professor Thorn's eyebrows rose. Well done, Mr. Velasquez. Unexpectedly elegant. A few students nearby whispered. Thanks, Inigo said, rubbing the back of his neck. Serena leaned toward him and whispered, You made that look easy. He grinned. I winged it. When class ended, students began filing out. Serena lingered behind. Want to grab something to eat? She asked. There's a floating cafe near the East Garden. It serves the best mana-infused tea. Sure, Inigo replied. I could use a recharge. They walked out together, sunlight spilling through the glass arches above. Students passed them with floating trays and notebooks, magical pets trailing behind their owners like loyal shadows. As they reached the garden, Serena slowed her steps. I was really nervous about starting this term, she admitted. I didn't think I'd find someone I could talk to like this. Inigo glanced at her. You're not so bad, Serena. She smiled, brushing a strand of hair aside again. You either. They reached the floating cafe, its floor suspended on magic runes above a shallow pond. A few tables bobbed gently in the air. They ordered tea and sat down under a crystalline dome looking out over the campus. For a moment it was quiet. Then Serena spoke again, more serious this time. You're not from around here, are you? Inigo blinked. What makes you say that? The way you talk. Your ideas. That weapon you used. It's not from this world, is it? He looked away, staring at the surface of his tea. No, he admitted. It's not. She didn't press. Instead she smiled softly. Then I'm glad you're here anyway. Inigo looked at her, surprised and maybe a little moved. For once, someone didn't ask 100 questions or demand explanations. He just accepted it. He chuckled. Yeah. Me too. They clinked their cups gently, steam curling in the air. And just like that, the first day of his new life as a Magic Academy student had begun. And he already has plans on how he would plan to use this Royal Magic Academy to his advantage. In his past life he had seen a class called Gunner in most MMORPG, where they could jump as high as a house, dash that could cover 5 to 10 meters in an instant, and can be done so in the air, how bullets and cannons create such environmental damage. With his enchantment magic it would be possible to copy it here. The warm hum of mana lanterns glowed from the rafters of the restaurant as Inigo pushed open the front doors. A familiar chime echoed from the enchanted bell overhead, a sound that had become oddly comforting. The sun was just beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting golden hues across the street outside. It had been 2 days since his first class at the Royal Magic Academy, and with only 3 sessions a week he had enough breathing room to return to his business ventures. Inside, the modest establishment buzzed with the murmur of customers and the clinking of ceramic plates. Adventurers, merchants, and a few familiar townsfolk chatted over bowls of steamed dumplings and hearty cuts of beast meat. Lyra stood behind the counter, a tray in one hand and a menu in the other. When her eyes found him, they lit up. Inigo. You're back, she said, weaving through the tables to meet him. How was your first class? He slung his satchel onto a nearby chair and collapsed into the seat with a tired grunt. It was like learning calculus from a dragon. But manageable. Did you blow anything up? Only a coin. He smirked. Professor called it unexpectedly elegant. I call it improvisation. Lyra laughed, brushing her bangs from her forehead. You're making quite the impression. Inigo leaned back, letting the aroma of sizzling spices fill his senses. So how's business? Picked up a little, she said. Especially since word got out that the guy who beat Cernan Valmont owns this place. Inigo rolled his eyes. Great. I'm trending. Lyra chuckled, but her expression shifted into something more serious. She sat across from him, her fingers idly tracing the rim of a glass of iced berry tea. Is there something you want to tell me? Inigo asked. Lyra simply nodded her head. There is. I will admit this to you, Inigo. Although having a business is fun by cooking burgers and fries. But I still want to practice my profession as an adventurer. Inigo hummed in understanding. I know this business is just part-time, not full-time. In fact, I am feeling the same way. This world is full of adventures. I don't want to waste it over a burger joint. I know this business is going to rise as a corporation in the near future, but the promise of adventure in this world is too enticing. How about we go for a quest? Like we always do. Lyra's eyes gleamed. You mean it? You'll come with me? Inigo nodded, leaning back with a smirk. Come on. You think I'm gonna let you hog all the rewards and loot? Not a chance. He laughed, short, bright, and relieved. Then it's settled. We're partners again. Inigo raised his cup. To the next quest. Lyra clinked hers against his. To adventure. They didn't waste time. After locking up the restaurant and leaving a sign on the door, closed for adventure, back soon, the two made their way toward the Adventurers Guild. It was only a few blocks away. As they approached, Inigo noticed something new. A large notice board had been placed out front, covered with flyers and parchment sheets stamped with guild seals. A few adventurers lingered nearby, arguing over who'd taken which contract first. Lyra scanned the board quickly. There, she said, pointing to a notice in the upper corner. Request: Dungeon Infestation, Hollowwood Hills. Threat: Minotaur-type beasts reported in dense clusters. Location: Abandoned Quarry Trail, 3 hours west of Eldrith. Party limit: 4 members. Objective: Clear out the lair. Confirmed Minotaur presence. Bounties awarded per confirmed kill and completion. Reward: 400 gold base plus salvage rights. Inigo whistled. Minotaurs, huh? They've been reported more frequently near the hills, Lyra replied. Fast, strong, and territorial. If they're nesting in caves, it'll be brutal. And profitable, Inigo added with a grin. They entered the guild. The air inside was thick with the scent of leather oil and baked bread. Adventurers lounged on benches or sat at tables scribbling on maps. A few clerks worked behind wooden counters, sorting quests and stamping completion reports with glowing seals. At the far end of the main hall stood a sturdy desk of polished oak, stacked with scrolls and pinned maps. Behind it, a tall man with a silver beard and a deep scar down his cheek stood reviewing reports. His armor was half-worn and half-formal, chainmail sleeves beneath a black leather vest with the guild's insignia stitched over his heart. Lyra approached him. Guildmaster Thorn. The man looked up, raising one bushy brow. Lyra Rain. Haven't seen you in a while. Thought you retired to open a bakery or something. It was a burger joint, Lyra replied with a sheepish grin. But I'm back. And I've got a partner this time. She gestured toward Inigo. Thorn looked him over, noting his casual clothes, the faint glint of magic around his holster and the confident stance. You're the one who dueled Cernan. Velasquez, right? That's me, Inigo replied. Looking to take the Minotaur job. Thorn grunted. You've got guts, I'll give you that. Most rookies don't jump into horned death traps on day 2. We're not most rookies, Lyra said. We've worked together before. We're efficient. Thorn nodded slowly. Fair enough. But rules are rules. That raid's capped at 4. That means you'll need 2 more in your party. Anyone already claimed the job? Inigo asked. Not yet, Thorn said. But that won't last long. Word's getting around. This dungeon's near a ley-choked area, so magical interference's been warping the terrain. Smart money says this lair isn't natural. Something drove them in. Could be more than minotaurs, Lyra muttered. Could be, Thorn agreed. Which is why I suggest finding reliable allies. No dead weight. He stamped the guild token and slid it across the desk. You're signed up. You've got until tomorrow morning to register your full party and report to the western checkpoint. Inigo picked up the token. It shimmered faintly, encoded with magical data linking their names to the request. Lyra turned to him as they stepped away from the counter. All right. We've got the job. Now we just need 2 more teammates, Inigo said. They both paused, scanning the guild hall. There is a lot of them, but if they were interested in this quest they would have taken it. Which means interested party may not be in this guild. Got anyone in mind? Inigo asked. It will be best if we are to post on the adventurers board that we are looking for 2 party members. Since we are both marksmen, we are going to need someone who can be frontline and A. Inigo stepped back and pinned a neatly written notice onto the side of the adventurers recruitment board. The parchment fluttered slightly as the breeze rolled in from the open windows, the scent of baked bread and iron lingering in the air. Seeking party members for dungeon clearance. Party. Inigo gold-ranked marksman enchanter. Lyra Rain gold-ranked archer. Dungeon type. Hollowwood Minotaur infestation. Location. 3 hours west of Eldrith. Time. Departing tomorrow morning. Slots available. 2, tank plus healer preferred. Apply in person, will be at the lounge table until sunset. Serious adventurers only. Inigo pressed the pin deeper into the wood, gave the notice one last glance, and then turned to Lyra, who was already making herself comfortable at one of the long communal tables. She sipped from a steaming mug of lemon leaf tea, a crossbow case resting beside her seat. Now we wait, Inigo said as he sat down across from her. Lyra tilted her head toward the board. Think anyone'll bite? I mean, it's a minotaur-infested cave. 400 gold base plus salvage rights, Inigo said, folding his arms. If they're smart and not suicidal, they'll at least ask. Hours passed. The morning crowd gradually thinned, replaced by mid-tier adventurers discussing other assignments. A few curious eyes landed on the posting. Some even approached, but after reading the part about minotaurs or ley-choked terrain, they quickly lost interest and moved on. A dwarf glanced at it, chuckled and muttered, "Suicidal kids," before returning to his drink. Okay, Lyra said with a forced grin as she nudged her tea aside. We might have overestimated Eldritha's courage levels. No, Inigo replied dryly. We overestimated their interest in actual work. Still, neither of them left. Inigo cleaned the chamber of his Desert Eagle with quiet focus while Lyra started doodling sketches of potential team logos in the corner of a napkin, crosshairs wrapped around a burger for some reason. Just as the bells of midday tolled across the rooftops of Eldrith, signaling the second hour past noon, the door of the guild creaked open. A gust of wind swept in and with it, a soft clanking of armored boots. Heads turned. The newcomer stepped in with a presence that immediately stood out from the rumpled and grimy adventurers littering the hall. She was tall, at least a few inches above Inigo, and wore polished silver plate armor with gold inlays around the collar, bracers and trim. A blue cape, embroidered with the emblem of a sunburst cross, billowed slightly behind her. Her helmet was clipped to her hip, revealing long blonde hair tied in a cascading braid, and her expression was calm, almost serene. Her emerald eyes scanned the guild hall until they landed directly on the board. She stepped forward, read the notice carefully, then turned her head toward the table where Inigo and Lyra sat waiting. Without a word she approached. Inigo leaned forward, instantly more alert. Lyra placed her napkin down and straightened up. The woman bowed slightly with one hand over her chest. "Blessings upon you. My name is Elira Dorn, a crusader and a gold-ranked adventurer." Inigo blinked. "That's a mouthful." Lyra elbowed him. Elira didn't seem offended. "You posted this request?" she asked, gesturing gently toward the board. "We did," Lyra said. "I'm Lyra and this is Inigo." Elira nodded. "I wish to join your raid." Inigo raised an eyebrow. "You read the details? Hollowwood. Minotaurs. Cave dungeon." "I did. And you still want in?" Elira clasped her hands in front of her, posture perfect. "The creatures are abominations. I have sworn to purge such evils from this world, and I have not yet fulfilled my quota this month." Inigo tried not to grin. "You have a monster-killing quota?" "It is less of a literal quota and more of a personal duty. I have been trained to shield others from harm and strike down beasts of unnatural strength. A minotaur infestation falls within my charge." Lyra leaned forward, intrigued. "Your front line?" Elira nodded. "Crusader specialization. My shield is enchanted with reflect magic. I can hold a defensive stance against heavy physical blows. In addition, I possess 2 minor light-based wards and a mana-converting barrier." Inigo and Lyra exchanged a glance. "She sounds perfect," Lyra whispered. "Too perfect," Inigo whispered back. "We sure she's not here to evangelize us into a church cult?" "I can hear you both," Elira said serenely. They froze. Elira smiled faintly. "I do not proselytize. Only protect." Inigo broke the silence first with a laugh. "Hey. All right. You're hired." "I will not let you down," Elira replied with a bow. Inigo offered a handshake. "Welcome to the team, Crusader Elira." She clasped his hand firmly. "Just Elira will do." Inigo nodded, impressed by her strength. It wasn't brute force, it was trained, refined power. He could tell just from that grip she'd held a sword longer than some nobles had been alive. With one slot filled, the team finally looked half ready. Inigo pulled out a second parchment. "Still need a healer," he said. "You know anyone who's got magic that doesn't involve blowing things up?" "I apologize, but I don't have any that I can recommend," Elira said calmly. "Perhaps we should wait a bit longer. The right one may find us." Inigo sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Let's just hope it doesn't take another few hours. I don't want to be picking from stragglers when the job starts tomorrow." They resumed waiting, the ambient noise of the guild settling into the background. Laughter from the bar, murmurs of parties planning B-rank bounties, and the occasional thump of heavy boots. Time crawled forward as the shadows shifted across the flagstone floor. Then just before the hour struck 3, the front doors creaked open again. A gust of wind swept through and Inigo stiffened. From the doorway stepped a young woman clad in a sleek crimson coat over a tailored battle corset. A pendant of silver crystal glinted from her neck, and her short silver-white hair was unmistakable. A satchel of alchemical tools hung at her side and her expression was calm, but curious. "Serena," Inigo said aloud before he could stop himself. She turned, eyes locking onto his with a faint tilt of her head. Inigo. I heard you were recruiting." Lyra blinked. "You two know each other?" Inigo stood slowly. She's a classmate. Royal Magic Academy.